pronouncement of judgment, CBI versus Kuldeep Singh in applications.
You can sit if you want to. While I began to pen this judgment, in the quiet aftermath of the end of arguments, the courtroom had fallen silent, the voices of arguments had faded. The echoes of accusations no longer filled the courtroom or my ears. What remained was the quiet weight of responsibility of being a judge, who had taken oath on the Constitution of India, that is Bharat, to uphold the purity and dignity of the judicial system with one persistent question: should I recuse? It was also that moment when I realized that my silence as a judge itself is being put to test. And now, the question is no longer about the case, but about the judge and the fairness of the process and the institution itself. While in my entire life, as in the lives of many of my brother and sister judges across this country, the cases put up before us for adjudication test our knowledge, intellect, and experience at times. Before few of us, a litigant, through a case, tests the institution's resilience itself. This case belongs to the latter category. The challenge before me was not that I had to adjudicate difficult questions of law or fact, but I was drawn to adjudicate a recusal application against myself. However, it is not for the first time that such an application has been filed before the same judge seeking recusal by a litigant. Therefore, in that sense, it is not extraordinary situation for a judge. In the past, before this High Court itself, there have been multiple occasions when applications for recusal have been filed before the same judge, which have been heard and decided by them. The issue before me was clear as to whether I should recuse from hearing the present case. I was thus faced with a situation where my impartiality and dignity had been challenged, and the natural instinct would have been to recuse without hearing the application seeking recusal, which would have been the easier path of withdrawing and stepping aside. However, for the sake of institution, I decided to adjudicate the recusal application, or it throws questions not only at me, but also at the institution itself. It also weighed in my mind that all my brother and sister judges and the judges of district courts of Delhi, who are part of this institution, may be affected by the outcome of this application, since it may be cited as a precedent and many other litigants may take a similar course. Equally was it clear to me that I had to decide it totally undisturbed and unaffected by accusations and insinuations in a fair manner, as objectively as it is required of a judge, and to test the recusal applications purely on the basis of jurisprudence of recusal laid down till date in our country. But that is what I have been trained to do as a judge, and what I have lived in the 34 years of my judicial career. During arguments, the applicants repeatedly submitted before me that they do not doubt my integrity on any account, and they are seeking recusal not because they doubt my integrity, but because of apprehension in their own minds that I may be biased. What is also important is the fact that today I am dealing with an apprehension in the mind of the litigant and not actual bias in myself, which needed a thorough examination. What made my task very difficult and challenging was that during arguments, contrary stands were taken. All the applicants at the beginning of the arguments on recusal, and some in the pleadings as well, submitted before this court that they have complete respect for this court as an individual judge, and they do not doubt integrity of any kind or fairness of this court. However, still they wanted the case to be transferred, not because I was biased, but because they have apprehension in their mind that I may be biased. I am fully conscious of the fact that today I am not to judge the litigant, but the litigant has put me and this institution on trial. And it will be dealt with as it should be, not only on my behalf, but on behalf of the institution of judiciary itself. To reiterate, though choosing the path of recusal without even hearing the application for recusal would have been quiet, comfortable, uncontroversial, and easy, but a reputation once surrendered by a judge to accusations of bias, if not dealt with, will be very difficult to reclaim. Therefore, I choose the path to resolve the controversy thrown at me, where my integrity has been put to test. The strength of judicial institution lies in strong resolve to respond appropriately to such accusations fearlessly and unhesitatingly. It is with this resolve that I begin writing my judgment in an objective manner without being affected by any of it. Now I am giving my brief observations, though not all, on examples of prima facie observations and interim relief granted in favor of respondent number 18, Arvind Kejriwal, and members of his political party. The argument of recusal applicants have stated that merely because this court had granted limited interim relief on the first date of hearing and recorded certain prima facie observations, an apprehension has crept in his mind that I may be biased. So I think because the arguments were in Hindi, I must also tell this too in Hindi so that people will understand as they understood the arguments of the litigant. मैंने पहली तारीख पर prima facie observations क्यों दिए? उसके examples. It will be appropriate to set out some instances where either the applicant Arvind Kejriwal herein or other leaders belonging to his political party were granted interim relief and stay by this court on the very first date itself without hearing the other side or calling for the reply, and such interim orders continue to operate till now. अब मैं वो एग्जाम्पल्स दे रही हूँ जिसमें अरविंद केजरीवाल जी और उनकी पार्टी के जो अन्य सदस्य हैं उनको पहली तारीख पर बिना दूसरी पार्टी को सुने इस कोर्ट ने जो रिलीफ्स, जो प्रेमा फेसाई ओपिनियन और जो स्टे दिए हैं, I will give you those examples. In the case of Arvind Kejriwal and another, the petitioners therein, who are applicants, respondents Shri Arvind Kejriwal and Shri Manish Sisodia before this court, in the present proceedings, had challenged a summoning order. In that matter, the coordinate bench had stayed the operation of the impugned summoning order on the very same date of hearing itself, when neither the complainant nor his counsel were present before the court, and thus without hearing the other side. The said interim order continues to operate till date for about 6 years. However, the petitioners therein have no grievance with that interim order, even though relief was granted to them on the very first date without hearing the complainant, perhaps because the order was passed in their favor. The said matter was last listed before this court, this judge, when it was adjourned to 14th of July 26 at the request, and it was this court, this judge only, which had extended the interim order of stay, which was ex parte in favor of Shri Arvind Kejriwal and others. Similarly, in Raghav Chadda versus others, were two petitions filed by members, leaders of the same political party, of which Shri Arvind Kejriwal is the national convener. In those matters, summons had been issued to the petitioners in the complaint cases of defamation filed by members of another political party. In the said petitions, this court, in the interest of justice, had directed the trial court to adjourn the matter to a date beyond the date fixed before this court, and the interim relief granted in favor of the petitioner was allowed to continue. This was done even though no arguments were heard on the merits of the case due to paucity of time, which was specifically recorded in the order itself. No allegation of any bias or any ideological inclination was voiced at that time against the court by any of the parties. The petitioners in those cases who belonged to the political party of the applicant Shri Arvind Kejriwal also never argued that no interim order should be passed in their favor without first hearing the other side. Notably, the interim order has been operating in favor of the petitioners therein for last more than 2 years in this case. There are several other matters pending adjudication on the board of this court within MP MLA category, including cases filed by leaders belonging to the political party of the applicant Shri Arvind Kejriwal, where interim orders were granted in their favor on the very first day of hearing after recording their submissions, detailed, expressing prima facie view, even in the absence of the opposite party. Many such interim orders have been continued by this court, by this judge, but no allegation has been leveled in those cases, perhaps because those orders were in their favor. Be that as it may, these two examples have been discussed only to show that passing interim orders or recording prima facie observations at the initial stage, even in the absence of opposite party, is neither unusual nor indicative of bias. It is settled law when urgency exists, the court finds that the matter requires consideration, interim relief may be granted after recording the submissions made and forming a prima facie view. A judicial practice which is accepted without objection when it operates in one's favor cannot suddenly become a ground of bias when the same course is adopted in another case by a court of law. Earlier orders passed by this court which were set aside by the Supreme Court. Shri Arvind Kejriwal has also stated another argument was that all the orders that I have passed, यानी मैं जितने भी ऑर्डर करती हूँ इनके खिलाफ वो सारे ऑर्डर सुप्रीम कोर्ट उल्टे कर देती है. तो मैं जितने भी ऑर्डर करती हूँ उनमें ऑब्जर्वेशंस ऐसी होती हैं कि जब सुप्रीम कोर्ट उन्हें सेट असाइड कर देती है तो इसलिए मुझे ये सुनना ही नहीं चाहिए. उसका जवाब Another submission made before this court was that the earlier detailed judgments passed by this court relating to challenges to arrest or applications for bail, as noted above, were subsequently overruled by the Honorable Supreme Court. In this regard, it is to be noted that the bail application of Shri Sanjay Singh, PMLA case was rejected by this court by judgment dated 7 February 2024, who is not even an accused before this court in this case, but I am still giving an example because this example was cited by the litigant himself, who is not a respondent before this court. In the present proceedings, he was granted bail by the Honorable Supreme Court on the basis of concession made by ED that he may be enlarged on bail, and the Honorable Supreme Court had specifically recorded in the order 2nd of April 2024, no comments were made on the merits of the case of Shri Sanjay Singh. Similarly, in the case of Shri Manish Sisodia, the Honorable Supreme Court granted bail to him on the ground of delay of trial by judgment dated 9 August 2024. No observations were made by the Honorable Supreme Court on the merits of the case or on the findings recorded by this court while deciding this bail application on 21/5/24. It is also relevant to note that at an earlier stage, the Honorable Supreme Court itself had rejected the bail application of respondent number 8 on merits after considering the allegations and the material placed against him, Shri Manish Sisodia versus CBI. As far as applicant Shri Arvind Kejriwal is concerned, it is pertinent to note that when he had challenged the judgment of this court, upholding the validity of his arrest, the Honorable Supreme Court had found that there were, in fact, sufficient reasons to believe for the purpose of effecting his arrest under the provisions of PMLA. However, only the issue regarding the need for necessity of arrest and whether such necessity is to be read into the power of arrest was referred by the Honorable Supreme Court to a larger bench for consideration, and this court's order was not set aside. Since the said issue was referred to a larger bench and its adjudication was likely to take some time, the Honorable Supreme Court had granted interim bail to Shri Arvind Kejriwal, who had earlier been released on interim bail. When a judge sits as a neutral adjudicator, the parties appearing before the court cannot question the competence of the judge by stating that since some of her judgments have been modified or set aside by a higher court, she is therefore not fit to do justice. यानी अगर किसी कोर्ट का कोई भी फैसला कोई हायर कोर्ट सेट असाइड कर सकती है, तो किसी भी लिटिगेंट को ये कोई हक नहीं है कि वो यहाँ खड़ा होकर ये बोले कि ये जज कोई फैसला करने के लायक नहीं है, क्योंकि जज की कॉम्पिटेंस को उसका हायर कोर्ट डिसाइड करता है, लिटिगेंट डिसाइड नहीं करता. There exists a clear boundary line for judges when it comes to entering the domain of parliament or the state legislature and questioning certain aspects, except as permitted under the constitution. The same principle will apply in reverse. A politician or an accused who happens to be a politician cannot be permitted to cross the boundary and sit in judgment over the competence of a judge. In any case, the fact that judgment has not been set aside or modified is a matter of record. Now, apprehension, the next point of Shri Arvind Kejriwal regarding जो statement देश के होम मिनिस्टर ने कहीं पर की है. This court finds that neither this ground had been mentioned in the recusal application nor any details were provided regarding the same. The accusation against this court is that there is a apprehension of bias in the mind of the litigant since the home minister of this country had made a statement in a television program. Seeking recusal of the court on such a ground that a union minister, or for that matter, any politician in a television program has expressed an opinion that a particular court may pass an order which may be adverse to a particular party would amount to proceeding purely on imaginations and disbeliefs of the litigant. Clearly, this court has no control over what a politician or the litigant himself, who is also a politician, may choose to state in the public domain or in his political life. It equally cannot regulate or control statements made by politicians in the public discourse. Even otherwise, it is a matter of common knowledge that such statements are made by political parties with rival in the public domain. Now the next ground, alleged apprehension of bias arising from participation of this program of this judge in some events organized by one अखिल भारतीय अधिवक्ता परिषद. अगला ग्राउंड था कि मैंने अधिवक्ता परिषद, अखिल भारतीय अधिवक्ता परिषद के बहुत सारे प्रोग्राम्स क्योंकि मैंने अटेंड किए थे और वो श्री अरविंद केजरीवाल की आइडियोलॉजी के विरुद्ध हैं, तो इसलिए उनके माइंड में ये एप्रीहेंशन है कि मैं उनसे न्याय नहीं कर पाऊंगी. ऑफ ऑल द रिक्यूजल, लेकिन ये वाला ग्राउंड और किसी भी रिस्पोंडेंट ने नहीं लिया, ये सिर्फ अरविंद केजरीवाल जी ने लिया है. तो ये ऑब्जर्वेशन सिर्फ उनकी एप्लीकेशन श्री अरविंद केजरीवाल जी के एप्लीकेशंस में बताई जा रही है. At the outset, this court must state that the functions or programs organized by Akhil Bharatiya Adhivakta Parishad were not political functions or party events. They were programs organized by a body of lawyers where as occasions such as Women's Day celebrations, seminars for lawyers on new criminal laws, and other professional discussions were conducted, and speakers were invited to interact with members of the legal fraternity. The CBI has also placed on record, along with its reply and annexures, some flyers of the programs organized by Akhil Bharatiya Adhivakta Parishad. A bare perusal of the same would show that in the past, many judges of this country have been participating in them. In my opinion, merely because in my capacity as a judge, I was invited to deliver a lecture or interact with younger members of the bar or other members of the legal fraternity, the same cannot be used to insinuate political association. Such an argument has to give way to the right and duty of a judge to attend legal functions organized by members of the bar for the benefit of legal fraternity. It is difficult to understand what is meant by sympathizing with the lawyer's body without any specific allegation or material. Though it is understandable that membership of or active participation in the affairs of a foundation or body having direct affiliations or specific interests may in some situations raise an apprehension of bias, it is difficult to appreciate how, in the complete absence of such circumstances, mere participation as a chief guest or speaker in a legal program organized by an association can by itself give rise to an apprehension of bias or lead to a conclusion that such participation has foreclosed the judge's ability to approach the case with an open mind. ये कोई भी कैसे कह सकता है कि just because मैंने किसी अधिवक्ता परिषद या लॉयर्स के फंक्शन में जाके मैंने एक लेक्चर डिलीवर किया तो मेरा माइंड इतना क्लोज हो गया होगा कि मैं दूसरे कई सारे केसेस को मैं फेयरली डिसाइड नहीं कर सकूंगी. It also does not escape the notice of this court. The applicant, Shri Arvind Kejriwal, has selectively placed on record only those events attended by this court which were organized by Akhil Bharatiya Adhivakta Parishad. However, this court, as well as many other judges, routinely attend official functions organized by various universities, law schools, University of Delhi, NLU, private colleges, private and government hospitals, and different forums of lawyers. Even while serving as a district judge, I had visited several schools and colleges for delivering lectures as part of legal literacy programs. Needless to say, such educational institutions or forums may at times be headed by individuals who may have their own political ideologies. However, such participation is part of maintaining relationship between the bench and the bar and also engaging with the younger members of entering the profession or even at times the community in general. Whatever the organization may be, whosoever its founders or whichever college or university it may be, in any part of the country, judges are invited in their capacity as judges of a court to interact with law students or members of the bar. In such interaction, there is no space for any personal or political ideology, and the engagement is often confined to the law, the functioning of the courts, and the relationship between the bench and the bar. The relationship between the bar and the bench is not confined only to courtrooms. It extends to various professional and institutional interactions. It is not uncommon for bar associations to organize events such as seminars, lecture, farewell functions, on the retirement of judges, gatherings and festivals or occasions like New Year, where members of the bar and the bench interact with each other. Even friendly matches, including so and so, are played between the bar and the bench. This court is of the firm opinion that no litigant can be permitted to sever or weaken the relationship between the bar and the bench, which is sacred and stands above the politics of any level. The bar and the bench share a relationship which may perhaps be beyond the understanding of many, but the bar and the bench themselves understand it in the manner in which it has been understood historically. Furthermore, some members of the bar may at times be representing a particular party. However, when they appear before a court of law, whether in private matter or otherwise, their cases are adjudicated on the basis of the merits of the case and not judging them through the prism of ideology or political affiliations. Many persons are appointed to the bench from the bar, and they may have different ideologies, and they may have represented a different government. However, it does not foreclose their mind to impartial judging. The judiciary cannot be placed in an ivory tower and expected to live a life of complete seclusion, cut off from society, organization, and even the bar. If that were so, how would judges understand the society in which people live and the realities of life they are called upon to adjudicate? The floodgates of courts cannot be opened for litigants to plant seeds of distrust, suspicion, and mistrust solely on this basis. Such acceptance would also lead to judges avoiding and declining intellectual engagements and social events organized by bar and attended by the bench, or organized by the bench and attended by the bar. Judges by this standard would be forced to withdraw from public discourse and from sharing their experiences. When a judge attending a legal event and interacting with legal fraternity in, say, a women empowerment program, where only speech is delivered on women empowerment or new laws, be treated as evidence of bias? If such participation is used against a judge by going through social media active archives despite not having attended such events oneself and seeks recusal without specifically pointing out any ideological or political statement made by the judge at such event, judges will eventually stop contributing meaningfully to the legal community. Impartiality is a presumption in favor of a judge, just as integrity is presumed in favor of every constitutional functionary upon taking oath of office. Impartiality is not a legal requirement, but an ethical one. When a judge takes oath of office, there arises a presumption that she will discharge her duties fairly without fear or favor. When a person seeks recusal of a judge, that presumption of impartiality has to be rebutted by the litigant raising such a plea. Mere apprehension or personal perception is not enough. The real test of absence of bias is whether, despite personal experiences, professional association, past positions, the judge is able to approach the case with an open mind. Now, the allegation next one, alleged apprehension of bias arising out of the professional engagement of relatives and the alleged conflict of interest. Shri Arvind Kejriwal, this is also the ground which was not taken by any other accused. सिर्फ अरविंद केजरीवाल जी ने ये एलिगेशन लगाया है, तो ये उन्हीं की एप्लीकेशन पर उनको आंसर हो रहा है. He drew this quote, Shri Arvind Kejriwal, through an affidavit, drew this court's attention to certain information which had been obtained under RTI, and insinuated regarding the number of cases marked to the family of so-and-so. The CBI filed a response to say, it was pointed out by CBI that the figures mentioned by applicant Shri Kejriwal in his additional affidavit, and which was circulated on social media at his behest as the member of cases assigned, were factually incorrect and mischievously projected, since they only reflected the number of dockets and not the number of separate matters marked to a counsel. The CBI also specifically stated that neither of the relatives of this court had dealt with, assisted in, or appeared in any matter connected with the present case pertaining to Delhi excise policy at any stage before any court, nor had they been involved in the present proceedings in any capacity whatsoever. In the opinion of this court, even if relatives of this court are empaneled on government panels, the litigant is still required to show the proximity, relevance, impact of such empanelment on the present case or on the decision-making power of this court. No such nexus has been shown. The independent professional engagement of the relatives of this court have no connection whatsoever with the present dispute, nor do they create any financial or personal stake of this court in the outcome of these proceedings. The learned Solicitor General also highlighted the manner in which social media campaign had been built around this issue. This court, though takes notice of the same, is of the opinion that courts, while deciding cases, are bound by their oath to the Constitution and have to deliver justice as per law, remaining unaffected by any narratives created in the public domain. This court, having served as a judge for nearly 34 years, is adequately trained to pay little heed to what may be said on social media, whatever be the intent or motive behind it. Although, when such campaigns are sought to be brought into judicial proceedings to cast aspersions on the integrity of a judge, the court may take note of the seriousness of such attempts. Yet, judicial decisions are rendered on the basis of law and the record before it, and not what is said on social media and the perceptions created by it. The issue, however, needs to be addressed. Merely because a judge takes an oath of office, our family does not take oath that they will not enter this profession or do well in it. The spouses, siblings, and children of a large number of judges may be in the same profession. If the children of a judge, such as in the present case, were born to her when she was a judicial magistrate herself, and chose to walk the same path, decide to pursue the same profession, that circumstance cannot be exploited by anyone. A litigant cannot dictate how the children or family members of a judge are to live their lives, whether they must rise through their own struggles and hard work, or whether they should be prevented from doing so. In the absence of any proof beyond doubt that the office of the judge has been misused for the benefit of her children or family, even a whisper of such allegation cannot be permitted. इसके कहने का मतलब ये है कि अगर कोई जज के बच्चे वकील बनना चाहें, तो क्या सिर्फ इसलिए कि मैं एक जज हूं, तो क्या किसी की फैमिली मेंबर्स को हम ये कहें कि क्योंकि अब आपके पेरेंट्स या आपकी वाइफ या आपके ब्रदर जज बन गए हैं, तो अब उनको कोई हक नहीं है कि वो लीगल प्रोफेशन में आए या लीगल प्रोफेशन को परसू करें? तो उनका फंडामेंटल राइट कहाँ है? उनका भी तो फंडामेंटल राइट है. Therefore, if the wife of a politician can be a politician without having to explain her expertise or experience in that field, and if the children of politicians can enter politics, how could it be just to question the children of a judge who study like others, struggle like others, and prove themselves in court like others to earn their livelihood? Accepting such an argument would mean taking away the fundamental rights of family members of judges, as if merely because the parent is a judge, their wife is a judge, the brother or sister is a judge, they can never enter the legal profession. There is an example on the same point by this court. Before the same judge, argument was raised because one of his very close family member was holding a very high position of law, law officer, and therefore he was asked to recuse. In that case, I have given the judgment. The judge has recused, and that you will find in the judgment. It must be mentioned here that the relatives of this court, whose empanelment has been referred to by applicant Shri Arvind Kejriwal, have no connection with the dispute in question. They have never dealt with or assisted in so and so. They have no proximity to the list. Even such as in the line of reasoning given by so and so is to be accepted, it would mean that only because relatives of this court are impaneled on a central government panel, this court should never hear any matter in which Union of India is a party, or where any highly placed legal officer of Union of India is a party. The argument also raises a larger question as to what exactly is being insinuated by Shri Arvind Kejriwal. Is it being suggested that relatives of this court survive only on the income earned by this empanelment? Or are they saying that this court is dependent on them? Is it being suggested that judge of this high court, who draws salary status and constitutional responsibility from judicial office, would compromise judicial independence because of the professional engagements of family members pursuing their own independent careers? Such an insinuation is not only unfounded, but also overlooks the very nature of judicial office and the independence attached to it. There is a clear distinction between a genuine conflict of interest and an attempt by litigant to create an impression of conflict of interest. यानी कि कहने का मतलब ये है कि दो चीजें होती है. एक चीज वो होती है जो एक्चुअल कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट होता है, और एक वो होता है कि एक चीज को आप ऐसे प्रोजेक्ट करते हैं कि वो सबको लगे कि ये तो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट है. तो मैंने अपने जजमेंट में उसको डिस्टिंक्शन की है कि कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट क्या होता है और क्या इस केस में उसको किसी एक चीज को प्रोजेक्ट किया जा रहा है एज कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट जो है ही नहीं. तो इन इंग्लिश, there is a clear distinction between a genuine conflict of interest and an attempt by litigant to create an impression of one. A litigant, instead of seeking justice, cannot be permitted to create a situation that lowers the judicial process itself by raising unfounded allegations. A conflict of interest arises only where there exists a real, direct, substantial connection or interest which may affect the impartiality of the judge. It cannot be assumed, imagined, or inferred from remote circumstances. It must rest on tangible material with clear nexus to the lists before the court. As an officer of this court, I am conscious of the fact that a lie or a false imputation, even if repeated 1,000 times in a court of law or on social media, does not become the truth. It remains false. And truth does not lose its strength merely because falsehood is repeated more often. Truth, even if softly spoken and supported by conviction and reason, is always stronger and more lasting than an argument made only to damage the reputation of a court and the credibility of the institution. Now, today's written submissions which were submitted by Shri Arvind Kejriwal. The written submissions were filed at a belated stage, but they were taken on record, going out of the way for Shri Arvind Kejriwal. It is noted by the court that in the additional affidavit earlier filed by the applicant Arvind Kejriwal himself, it was specifically stated that as per established procedure, it is the learned SG who marks cases to all panel lawyers. And in the same breath, he states that he was not insinuating anything against all the judges of this country and they are being dragged into this controversy. In the view of that matter, the argument now sought to be advanced appears to be self-contradictory. Since if the marking of the cases to panel is done by a particular law officer, it is not done only for a selectively chosen lawyer, pointed out by name by the applicant, but to all panel lawyers, whether related to any judge or anyone. It is not the case that such allocation is made only to the relatives of this court and to no other panel counsel. This court notes that at one stage, the applicant asserts that one mere empanelment is not sufficient to warrant recusal. And another, he contends that recusal is required precisely because work is allotted to the relatives of my relatives. These two positions cannot stand together, being inherently inconsistent. The question therefore arises as to why this court is being selectively targeted on that basis and why the applicant is taking a stand contrary to his own earlier pleadings and submissions. The applicant further stated that CBI, by arguing by such a standard, it would disqualify learned judges across the country as falsely widened the controversy, mischievously dragged the entire judiciary into the precipice, and that such a stand borders on contempt. He has even reserved liberty to initiate appropriate contempt proceedings against CBI officer who signed such written submission. This submission also stands in contrast with the earlier position taken by Arvind Kejriwal himself. When the applicant seeks to target one judge and raises allegation concerning the judge and her family, it is not considered by him to be an attempt affecting the dignity of the institution. However, when the CBI responds to it, it is stated that it has wider implications. Next. Justice should not only be done, but seen to be done. अब उनका एक कहना ये भी था कि जस्टिस सिर्फ होना ही नहीं चाहिए, ऐसा लगना भी चाहिए कि जस्टिस हो रहा है. उसका जवाब ये जो आर्ग्यूमेंट था, ये आर्ग्यूमेंट सभी जितने भी रिक्यूजल मांगने वाले एप्लीकेंट हैं उन सबका ये कॉमन है. ये श्री अरविंद केजरीवाल जी का नहीं है, उनके 3 थे, वो 3 मैंने अलग से बता दी. The question which arises is, who is to evaluate the appearance of such justice being done? यानी कि ये डिसाइड कौन करेगा कि जस्टिस हो रहा है या नहीं हो रहा है? ये कौन डिसाइड करेगा? तो ये डिसाइड करने का हक किसको है? सिर्फ लिटिगेंट को है या औरों को भी है? It is to be judged solely by litigant who feels uneasy only because he apprehends that he may not receive a favorable order? Or is it to be assessed by the standard of a reasonable and informed person? A litigant may not always be successful before a court of law. And it is the only higher court which can determine whether judgment is one-sided, contrary to law, or against the principles of natural justice. So therefore, a judgment of a district court can be set aside or upheld by higher court, and same thing will be true about the high court's judgment before a supreme court. The general unease of a litigant or apprehension that this court may not grant him relief must remain far below the elevated threshold required for a judge to recuse. सिर्फ क्योंकि ऐसा लगता है कि मुझे यहाँ से रिलीफ नहीं मिलेगा, वो ग्राउंड कभी नहीं हो सकता ये सोचने का कि ये जज बायस है. To test the apprehension or bias cannot rest entirely upon the subjective perception of a litigant who merely fears that the judge may not grant him relief in view of the adverse order suffered by him in the past. This court has already undergone every test that the law and the constitutional framework requires before I became a judge. First as a judicial officer, and eventually being elevated to the High Court of Delhi. My judicial career, expands over 34 years, which has tested me on touchstone of not only legal issues, but also on the ethical parameters expected of a judge, as any other judge on the bench with variable judicial and legal experience and law degree. However, can it be that judges would now have to pass an additional test put forth by a litigant to prove that they are fit to hear a case? In case the arguments raised are accepted, they will have to first pre-qualify any test which is put forth by a litigant to first decide as to whether the judge will hear the case or not. The judges will then, in that case, have to satisfy the manufactured test that they have not attended any social or legal function of a particular organization, or would have to ensure that their families don't work in the legal profession. Merely because they have chosen legal profession, the judge cannot be biased. A High Court judge cannot be judged on the touchstone of mere perception, suspicion, or personal belief or misbelief of a litigant. The standard is that of a reasonable person and not of an individual who may be guided by his own concerns or interests or ideologies. A judge cannot abandon judicial responsibility in the face of unfounded allegations. If such course is adopted, it would become impossible for any judge in this country to function independently. It is also to be noted that personal attacks on a judge are in fact attacks on the institution itself. The scars of such attacks, especially if recusal is allowed on such grounds, are not temporary and they have to be borne by the institution and not by the judge. Now, the catch-22 situation of seeking recusal. यहाँ पर इसमें मैं आपको ये बताऊंगी कि एक ऐसी सिचुएशन क्रिएट हुई है इस केस में कि मुझे एक ऐसी पोजीशन में रखा गया है कि मैं अगर रिक्यूज करूंगी तो तब क्या होगा और मैं अगर रिक्यूज नहीं करूंगी तो क्या होगा. तो एज ए जज हर जज को भी ये सोचना पड़ता है कि मैं जो फैसला करूंगा वो फैसला सिर्फ मेरे लिए नहीं होगा, उसके बहुत रैमिफिकेशंस दूसरों को भी होंगे. द कैच 22 The earlier one that I read, the judge of this court had not recused. Probably I forgot to say. The judge had not recused. Now the catch-22 situation of this application. The catch-22 of this recusal. A litigant's win regardless of the outcome. The self-represented litigant, by his argument, has also invited this court to a catch-22 situation in the present case, which appears to create a win-win situation for him. If this court were to recuse on account of accusations, the litigant would be in a position to claim that his allegations had substance and proof, and therefore the judge had recused. At the same time, if the judge and this court will not recuse, the litigant ultimately fails to obtain any relief on merit. If at all, he may say that he had already predicted the outcome. If he succeeds in obtaining the relief from this court, he may claim that the court had acted under pressure or fear. Thus, whichever way the matter proceeds, the litigant may attempt to portray the situation in a manner that suits his narrative. Nevertheless, the courts will not be invited to such a match of catch-22 situations. The judges are bound by the discipline of their office and ordinarily speak only through their orders and judgments. If such applications and applicants are entertained and judges bow down to such vilification and sustain systematic attacks on them, it would not merely be an attack on an individual judge, that is me, but on the institution itself. Today it may be this court, tomorrow it may be another. Such a malice would travel not only to the higher courts but also to the district courts. The jurisprudence has historically guarded against recusal merely at the asking of a litigant. The underlying reason is that the societal repercussions of entertaining such recusal applications, the institutional consequences, and the harm it may cause to the judicial independence have always weighed heavily in the minds of the judges of the Supreme Court as well as this court. The judicial precedents cited by this court in the preceding discussion would also show that the path of recusal sought by a litigant on unfounded grounds and unreasonable apprehensions has been consciously avoided even on allegations almost identical to those alleged against this court. Another issue that arises in the mind of this court is that if this court, by penning a judgment of recusal, gives an impression to the community that it can be intimidated by a political litigant, it would undermine the very duty of this court to preserve confidence in the institution and never allow it to be weakened either by its own acts or by the acts of a litigant. A recusal would also lead lead the public to believe that judges are aligned to a particular political party or ideology, though their oath commands them to remain neutral adjudicators. This court, by penning a recusal, cannot allow courts to turn into battlegrounds where judges' ideology and competence are questioned by litigants instead of the judge neutrally adjudicating upon the criminality of the acts of litigants or the parties, as the case may be. Further, if this court were to pen a recusal, it would open ये सारी बातें आई एम आस्किंग माई सेल्फ कि अगर मैं रिक्यूजल लिखूंगी तब क्या होगा, नहीं लिखूंगी तब क्या होगा. Further, if this court were to pen a recusal, it would open the doors for powerful litigants to attack judges, their families, and even their attendance at certain functions, making it a routine tool for forum shopping by giving it legality. Through such recusal, if a litigant wishes to go hunting, first for the judge deciding the case, and then for the bench he prefers to appear before, it would not only delay the delivery of justice, but would also place the other side, which may not have familiar resources, at a serious disadvantage. Now, if I were to withdraw readily, यानी मैंने भी आपको बताया कि मैंने अपने आप से पूछा कि मुझे रिक्यूज अगर मैं नहीं करूंगी और मैं ये लिखूंगी कि मुझे रिक्यूज नहीं करना, तब क्या हो सकता है. फिर मैंने ये सोचा कि अगर मैं सिर्फ इस एप्लीकेशन को फाइल करने से और बिना एक ऑर्डर पास किए अगर मैं रिक्यूज करती हूँ तो तब क्या होगा. If I were to withdraw readily, there can be no doubt that I had to walk the tightrope of deciding whether to recuse or to continue hearing the matter. While following my duty to uphold principle and the oath taken to dispense justice, I had to balance the duty to recuse so as to avoid even the appearance of bias with the duty to decide the case assigned to it as per its roster, so as to ensure that justice is not evaded or delayed by mere insinuations of perceived bias raised by a litigant. This court would certainly withdraw. मैं बिल्कुल withdraw कर लूं. Where it is convinced that there exists a real conflict of interest, अगर actually conflict of interest होता, and where recusal is genuinely warranted, या जहां recusal की जरूरत होती. It has done so in multiple cases in the recent past, as well as earlier, sometimes even without any party raising an objection, and at times despite parties themselves stating that they had no objection to this court adjudicating the matter. In such situation, to ensure that justice is not only done, but is also seen to be done, this court has directed transfer of such matters to other benches, including cases falling within the MP-MLA matters. यानी मैंने इस कोर्ट में यहाँ रहते हुए और अदरवाइज मैंने बहुत से केस MP-MLA केस भी दूसरे कोर्ट्स में ट्रांसफर किए हैं जहाँ किसी भी लिटिगेंट ने भी नहीं बोला था कि इसको ट्रांसफर किया जाए, क्योंकि मुझे अगर ऐसा महसूस हुआ कि मुझे ये केस ट्रायल नहीं करना चाहिए. However, a judicial function cannot be surrendered by a judge. जो ड्यूटी मुझे दी गई है मैं उसको सरेंडर नहीं कर सकती. Nor can a judge surrender a reputation to the mere perception of a litigant. This court understands that being a judge, it is not required to respond to criticism, including criticism in the public domain that many at times be unjustified or baseless. मुझे ये पता है कि मैं एक जज हूँ और जज होते हुए मुझे क्रिटिसाइज किया जाएगा. मुझे उस क्रिटिसिज्म के बारे में कुछ कहना है या नहीं कहना है, चाहे उसके बारे में चाहे वो क्रिटिसिज्म अनजस्टिफाइड सोशल मीडिया में हो या किसी भी एप्लीकेशन में हो. एज अ जज मुझे कब और कितना रिस्पॉन्ड करना है मुझे पता है. At the same time, it is equally aware that it is not expected to submit to unfounded allegations on its integrity, to permit apprehensions to be cast on its fairness, or to succumb to allegations of perceived bias. If I were to withdraw readily, अगर मैं इसको बिना सुने, बिना डिसाइड किए मैं इसको रिक्यूज कर देती, I would be abandoning my adjudicatory responsibility in the face of perceived allegations. तो मैं अपनी ड्यूटी सरेंडर कर देती. He does not doubt, repeatedly stated during arguments, Shri Arvind Kejriwal and other litigants repeatedly stated during arguments that he and them do not doubt my integrity, but question what he should do with his own mind, which makes him believe that he will not get justice from this court. श्री अरविंद केजरीवाल और बाकी लोगों ने रिपीटेडली ये कहा कि वो मेरी इंटेग्रिटी को डाउट नहीं करते और वो मेरी इंटेग्रिटी को किसी अकाउंट पर भी डाउट नहीं करते और वो मेरी बहुत इज्जत करते हैं, मगर उन्होंने ये कहा कि वो अपने माइंड का क्या करें कि उनका माइंड ऐसा कह रहा है कि मैं बायस हो सकती हूँ, यानी कि उनके माइंड में बायस, क्योंकि उनके माइंड में ऐसे विचार आ रहे. Illusions, speculation of the kind as discussed above on the part of a litigant cannot take place of reasonable apprehension. Unfounded allegations cannot be given credibility merely because this court chooses the easier path of stepping away to avoid the mud being slung at her and her family. The test of perceived bias also be whether such perception is objectively founded on some tangible material, or whether it is merely the suspicion of a litigant arising out of a political disagreement with the party. A recusal penned by this court will also carry deeper constitutional ramifications. You can read it in this. One argument Mr. Hegde had argued, he argued so well, अग्नि परीक्षा. मिस्टर हेगड़े ने एक बहुत ही अच्छा आर्ग्यूमेंट उन्होंने किया, अग्नि परीक्षा का एग्जाम्पल दिया. The learned senior counsel Shri Hegde, appearing for the applicant Shri Manish Sisodia, addressed a very enlightening argument by referring to the example of Agni Pariksha, which as per him, Mata Sita had to give not once but twice, through which he sought to convey that there are situations in life where despite one's integrity and purity being intact, one is still called upon to prove it again and again. This court is thankful for this enlightening and novel argument. However, today, if this court is being asked to undergo a Agni Pariksha by an accused who stands discharged, which means he has not been acquitted but has only been let off at this stage by the first court of the jurisdiction, on the ground of insufficiency of evidence, this court must counter question as to why a judge should be asked to undergo such a Agni Pariksha. At the mere asking of an accused who harbors apprehension or misbelief about a judge being biased, merely because he fears that the judge may ultimately render a verdict not in his favor in an application which has not even been heard, no lawyer or litigant can enter a court with a guarantee that the case will be decided in his or her favor. Until a matter is finally decided by the Honorable Supreme Court of this country, subject of course to the legal exceptions, judicial integrity cannot be put to trial by a litigant. Why it can be understood that the accused may wish to prove that he is clean and honest, but in that process, he cannot be permitted to attempt to prove that the judge herself is tainted. Such taint may not always be insinuated in terms of money. It may also be suggested in terms of perceived or imaginary biases of a mind which begins to look at everything with suspicion, believing that no one will do justice to him. Shri Arvind Kejriwal began his arguments with a sentence in open court as he argued in the mix of Hindi and English. मैं आपकी बहुत इज्जत करता हूँ that he has highest regard and respect for this country and is not doubting its integrity on any account, and has further stated in his additional affidavit that he is not alleging actual bias nor attributing any improper motive to this court. The rules of natural justice must apply equally when a judge is judging a litigant and when a litigant seeks to judge a judge. जब एक litigant किसी judge को judge करता है और जब कोई judge किसी litigant को judge करता है, हमेशा जो भी फॉर्मूला, जो भी लॉ, जो भी प्रिंसिपल हम उस पर लगाएंगे वो सेम होगा. तो जब लिटिगेंट मुझको जज करेगा और जब मैं लिटिगेंट को जज करूंगी तो उसका डिफरेंट क्राइटेरिया नहीं हो सकता. विदाउट एनी मटेरियल ऑन, जैसे विदाउट एनी मटेरियल ऑन रिकॉर्ड मैं किसी के खिलाफ कोई ऑर्डर पास नहीं कर सकती, उसी तरीके से कोई लिटिगेंट बिना किसी एविडेंस, बिना किसी सबूत, बिना किसी मटेरियल के जज को भी जज नहीं कर सकते. Cannot be said without any material on record. A judge can be placed under bail of suspicion or merely on the basis of an apprehension. For a litigant, the judge is expected to follow the principles of natural justice, evaluate material, decide the case in accordance with law and reason. The same fairness must apply when allegations are sought to be made against a sitting judge. Even a political leader, however powerful or influential he may be, cannot be permitted to weaken or damage an institution by making insinuations against a judge without any material. The end. Before I conclude, I must record that a courtroom cannot be theatre of perception. It is a space where doubt must answer to reason. I may add that the reputation of a judge, including mine, cannot be so fragile that it would yield without proof or material to insinuations. That reputation has been built by this court not in a day, but after adjudication of case after case, year after year, while remaining under the scrutiny in the open court and subject to correction within the hierarchical system of the judiciary by higher courts. In case this court withdraws from this case in the absence of any demonstrable cause, as is required under the law of recusal, it will be attaching weight to allegations which carry none. The judicial office and judges cannot be left vulnerable, since the reputation of a judge and of the system is not a personal asset or shield of one judge who is part of the system, but an institutional asset. On a closer examination, the narrative constructed in the applications for recusal was found to be based on conjunctures, urging this court to withdraw from adjudication of the present case solely on the basis of perceived inclinations attributed to me and contradictory arguments. If I were to accept these applications, it would set a troubling precedent, since the competence of judges to decide cases would then become dependent on the subjective comfort or discomfort of a litigant. When the question shifts from what is decided to who decides it, it becomes my bounden duty to answer it as fearlessly as I have all my life decided every case, every question, every issue between two litigants. Unfortunately, today, it is not a dispute between two litigants that I have been called upon to decide. It is between a litigant who is a discharged accused and myself, the judge. The rope that this court wears will not be allowed to be weighed down by insinuations. The arguments and pleadings before this court have fallen short of the standard required under the law and jurisprudence of recusal. Allegations and insinuations, though persistent and loud, can never take place of the proof required in law for seeking recusal. Judges are expected to bring to the bench an open mind and not an empty one. For decades, that steadiness has not been a choice but a duty with me. A judge cannot recuse to satisfy a litigant's unfounded suspicion of bias, not to avoid discomfort felt by it due to manufactured allegations, except in the present applications, would mean giving credence to an attempt to cast a shadow of doubt on the fairness of a judge without any material, and then insisting that such a shadow alone is sufficient for a judge to recuse from a case. This court has remained indifferent to the stature of the litigant appearing before it. In case this recusal is allowed, the judicial process would not remain independent but vulnerable to insinuations, which can be put under pressure of such unfounded allegation and thus become selectable and strategic move in the hand of a litigant. This court will stand up for itself and for the institution when such standing is required, though it may appear difficult. This court will decide when duty demands that a case is to be decided, even if it is inconvenient. And this court will not yield or retreat
where doing so would erode the credibility of the institution itself. The robe that this court wears is not so light that on a mere whisper of accusation, it would seek refuge in recusal where no reason for such recusal exists. If recusal on such grounds is accepted, it would risk the adjudicative process being shaped by the preference or discomfort of a litigant. And in that case, it would not be justice administered, it will be justice managed. This path is not permitted by our constitution. The personal apprehension of the applicants, howsoever persistently advanced, have not been able to pass the threshold test of reasonableness of bias, where a fair-minded and informed observer in the facts and circumstances of this case would conclude that there exists a real apprehension of bias. Recusal has to stem from law